happen. So if you're watching this, you're watching the replay because nobody has jumped on quite yet. But I don't know if you can see, but I should be able to see how many people are watching. And then if people post comments or questions underneath, I can actually, I'll if they're just ridiculous, I won't show them, but I can actually have them come up on the screen.
Oh, wonderful.
So I don't know if you'll see it or not. So we'll figure that out as we go along.
John, I see only your face, and
that's perfect. That's exactly what you should be seeing.
That's all like an 8x10 box. Yeah.
Perfect.
You're professional. Yeah.
I like nothing, and I'm dressed like a slob today because I knew I was doing this, right? Like sweatshirt, and it's cold here. It's cold. I'm in Maine.
Cold. Winter's my favorite season.
Cool. Not mine, but it's okay.
I mean, not Maine winter. I mean, when I lived in Chicago winter was not my favorite.
Yeah. So it looks like we have a couple people actually watching us at nice Vulcan hand signal, John. Thanks. So I can do some really creative ones. Hello, James. So
I can see them. They're popping up on my end as well.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So we have a couple people, and so we can sort of dig in and sort of introduce ourselves. So I'm John. I'm going to have Blythe introduce herself, and then I'll talk a little bit. Depending on what she says, then I want to seem either as good as she is. So yeah. I'll let you introduce yourself first, so then I can I don't know. I can't outdo anybody, so it's okay. So do you want to introduce yourself and talk about where you are for one thing, because we're in different states.
We are actually okay. So I'm Blythe Landry. I actually reside in Nashville. I've lived here for about 4 years, and my trade, if you will, is I'm a psychotherapist. I do therapy with people dealing with trauma, addictions, and acute grief. And then also the LGBTQ population. And I also have, my practice is about 98% virtual. So I'm used to video and I work from home. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm going to try to.
My best Facebook friend.
Yeah, this is our first time talking face to face, but we've been Facebook friends for a long time.
But I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see it, but I just put your website up, your URL. So
you're like a tech god, clearly.
People who are interested in checking that out, I would encourage it, because so I have a thought about therapy that I think everybody at some point in their life should go through therapy. Everybody should have the experience of having therapy at some point in their life, because none of us grow up unscathed. None of us go through life unscathed. So I'm a really strong supporter. I have lots of obviously therapist friends, and so I am a big supporter of what you do and appreciate what you guys do.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think all therapists should have also been in therapy at some point.
One would hope, yeah.
One would hope. It's not necessarily always the norm, but one would certainly hope. And for as many personalities as there are, there's that many kinds of therapists that are potentially a good fit. And the other thing that I've found over the years is that even when people have perfect parents, their reactions to that can be quite because their friends didn't have perfect parents. So even if you're a perfect parent, your kids may end up needing therapy.
Yeah. I didn't know there was such a thing as a perfect parent.
There's like 2 or 3 of them out there. And kids still needed therapy.
Because I think I'm a decent parent, but I mean, come on. Like, I certainly screw up my fair share. I'm a conscious parent, I think. I'm very conscious about my parenting, but and it's challenging because I have twin girls, and twins are their own challenge. Mm-hmm. And I'm a dude. I had a brother. Like, I didn't grow up around young girls, so I don't I'm just getting to know all of that side of it. So,
very practical today.
So I'll introduce myself. So I'm John Moore. You can see my name on the screen. If you're watching this right now live, you're probably one of my friends because it's on my page. But for those Oh, your mom's watching? Hi, Mom.
Probably not. She told me she was busy, but
Oh, come on. So I'll pop my website up. So I do a number of things, but I'm a trained life coach, and I'm also a shamanic practitioner. So I'm very spiritual. So I do sort of spiritually oriented life coaching. I won't get into it, but there's a big difference between coaching and therapy. I don't do therapy, which is why I try to ally a lot with therapists. And if I have clients who are talking to me about issues that I feel like they should be dealing with in therapy, then I will refer, because I'm conscious of doing things for the greater good. That's about it. I'm a dad. I'm an author. I do martial arts. I do cool things. But we're talking about. Oh, hello. We've got a hi here. Hi, John. Well, say hi to Blythe too. I mean, come on. Like I said, these are going to be in the live feed.
I accept my secondary position here. It's good.
Well, it's just because the feed's on my page at the moment, so it's mostly going to be people who know me. But we're talking about. I just sort of said the talk is about men and women, and we don't want to disclude people who are either gender fluid or non-binary. But there's been a lot of stuff in the news lately about gender issues, and specifically, I think everybody's heard about the stuff that's going on in Hollywood right now with Harvey Weinstein and this like decades of sexual harassment, sexual assault, all of these things. And I definitely want to get your take on all of this. My take is that so when I look at this from a shamanic perspective, right, we look at everything as having a shadow side. Like even people who are like Buddha had a shadow side, right? This is, to me, this is the shadow side of the masculine really showing itself, and people sort of stepping up to it. Like this stuff we know has been going on forever, right? A couple thousand years anyway, right? The patriarchy goes back to at least the Romans, maybe before that. And I'm hopeful that maybe we're at a point where we're starting to break with that, right? And I don't want to do all the talking here. I have lots and lots of opinions about this, but I want to get Blythe in here too, because I'm not trying to do the mansplaining thing either. I'm really conscious of that, right?
No, I think what I hear you saying, John, is that the darkness and the light are sort of co-created, right? And so if things are changing, which I think they really are, then all of the darkness has to become even more evident. Right. Sort of in one of the spiritual practices I partake in, there's a process where you have to take everything that's dark about you and expose it. And I feel like, or at least I like to believe that's what's happening right now. Everything's becoming exposed. And in terms of this Harvey Weinstein thing, I'm having all kinds of thoughts and feelings about it. First, I have an overwhelming amount of compassion and empathy and personal empathy towards the women who have been subjected to this. I have a lot of respect and honor and deep empathy for all of the men and women who are coming out on Facebook and talking about their experiences. And then I also have a lot of respect and honor for the people who aren't ready to do that publicly as well. And I think that there's a part of this that you and I have been discussing, and I just want to dive right in there, dive right in. Which is, I think we're in a danger zone though. When you're at that sort of precipice of like, the darkness is sort of going this way and the light, and they're sort of, arguing for attention right now publicly. I think we're in a danger zone of also forgetting that not every male presence on the planet, and the majority of the male presences on the planet, at least in my experience and many of my friends and clients' experiences, are not this person. And I think that we're in a danger zone here with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously as a male, I feel that, right? Like I feel like, sort of my shadow side is that, gosh, I don't want to be associated with these guys, but I'm afraid that I'm as a male responsible for this somehow. Like, I do feel like I've got to do something about this, and talking about it is one thing, and standing up to this, and I do feel like men have a unique responsibility, particularly with violence towards women, sexual violence, where we are the majority of the perpetrators. Clearly, it's not every male. Clearly, it's not the majority of males. But it's common enough. It's so prevalent. We don't even have really good statistics about how prevalent it is. That and like men have to be there to stop it. Like we have to be allies. We have to, we have to speak out. And it's not. I view these things not as women's issues, but as issues that affect women predominantly. But they're everybody's problem. It's everybody's problem. Men are, the vast majority causing the issue. But I do feel like, yeah, I mean, gosh, I want to dissociate as much as I can from that. Like I don't want to be lumped in with Harvey Weinstein or whoever else is, perpetuating these things. So yeah, I mean, it is this like really weird place to be in where I feel like I'm responsible, but I also want to deny that I'm responsible. Psychologically, it's a hard place for me and other men that I know to be in. And then you get the, what do you call them? The Men's Rights Act, the MRA guys. Like those guys, I'm sorry, those guys are nuts. And they're really damaged and really like, I mean, if you're in that, like, those guys need therapy, like in a serious way. I think I'm not an expert. I'm going to say mommy issues most of the time.
Yeah, potentially, but we can't treat them here. But yes, I can't. What I think I just thought of as you were talking, and I want to also this to be a dialogue where like we're mutually hearing one another, because I know one of the things we've also sort of shot back and forth is this idea that like how can women support men in feeling validated in their desire to make a difference, but also not be totally blamed for other male behavior, and then how can men support women in feeling validated in their very substantial and valid fears, right? Like so what I hear is that you want to take responsibility but not culpability. Like how can I be responsible for standing up to this? How can I be responsible for being a role model? How can I be responsible for what happened with your daughters this week?
Right.
And not allowing this and letting them know that they have a voice in these things. But I'm not culpable. I didn't do this thing. And I think there's a danger there where you start with your own personal issues or anyone's and your own desire to make a difference. The danger is going, well, I'm bad because I'm associated with this group. And I don't know, not only is that understandable, but I don't think it's actually how real change can happen, because that's going to force the men who want to make a difference to go into hiding. So how can you have a voice without assuming that your voice is more important than a female's, et cetera, if that makes sense?
Right. And for me, so I've been thinking a lot about power, political, personal, all of the ways that power shows up, right? And a really good friend of mine who's an amazing shamanic practitioner was asking people, what's your definition of power? And, lots of people chimed in. And because we travel in this circle, a lot of the answers were very spiritual, which is completely understandable. But if you look at like even the physical definition of power, right, it's the capacity to change something, right? So there's all different kinds of power. There's electrical power, right, where I flip a light switch and give me the power to illuminate the room. Power in itself, I think, is neutral. It's all in how it's used, and it's all in. So I can flip a light switch and light up my room and read a book, or I can, miswire something and flick a light switch and get electrocuted. Like those, right? Like those are different ways that power could be used. Yeah, and so it's all in how it's used. And so, our culture is structured as such that it's really been looked at as a zero-sum game, where for me to be a powerful male, I have to take away, like I can't empower females, or it goes like racially, for me to have a job, I can't have these immigrants from wherever coming in and they're going to take my power away. And so it's this artificial zero-sum game that it's been for such a long time. And it also becomes very pyramidal, where there's like two people on top running everything. And that, then you talk economically as well. Where really what I want is I want power with. Like, and I think the patriarchal structure harms men as much as it harms women. It's definitely, clearly, obviously harmful to women, but there's like, I think we're like, because we don't see what would happen if things are different, we don't even know how much it's harming us. Right. Where if we could stand side by side and have the same power and the same equality, and really, like, I consider myself a feminist in this way, that I think we should be standing side by side. And how do we do that? How do we have power with instead of power over? Right.
And how do we help one another eliminate? Because where there's that underbelly of fear,
yeah,
where there's that chasm, right? Like, so it's like where there's that, where the idea, and it's kind of a mirroring what you said, where if this person or this group has, I lose.
Right. Absolutely.
And that doesn't have to be the case. And I think the only way we can do this is starting one-on-one. I don't know that there's a bigger platform until more people are having these conversations just one-on-one. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I completely agree with that. Like, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's exactly why I want to have this conversation with you. I'm like, we're experts. I'm a man, you're a woman. We're experts in being men and women, at least, right? So we can have this.
I would hope, but yeah. Definitely not being a person, but definitely understanding that. And like before the call, you and I were talking about how some parts of us feel less. There are many parts of me that feel much more what one would equivocate with, like, masculinity, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about how there are parts of you that one would associate with femininity, and also talking about the energetic meaning of that as well.
Yeah. There's this. I'm not going to remember the person who came up with this theory, but it's this idea of holons, right? Like, of parts that organize into larger parts that organize into larger parts. An example of that is, we have, subatomic particles, and those are individual units, but they organize into, molecules, and those organize into cells, and cells organize into organs, and organs organize into, people or animals, and then people organize into cultures, and we organize into a planet. And so looking at things sort of through those lens, the traditional idea about, sort of the lighter side of masculinity is that masculine power, and this is not to say men are like this or women are like that, it's just that sort of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the archetypal ideas about that is that the masculine power is these holons wanting to evolve, right? Is that wanting to achieve and evolve. The dark side of that is I want to evolve at the expense of everybody else, right? The traditional feminine aspects, the divine feminine, the archetypal feminine, is about connection. It's about that connection of organization into groups, and then I'm not sure what the darker side of that would be. Maybe it's giving away power. Maybe it's giving away power to a group or whatever. And honestly, like, evolution, individual evolution, spiritual evolution, cultural evolution, comes, I think, from embracing both of those sides. I'm not sure what your take would be on that, but that's been sort of my, 1,000,000-foot view of sort of traditional archetypal masculine and feminine. I mean, the shadow side to those.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And I like what you said about giving away your power, right? I think that would be the negative. I don't want to call it the negative. I would call it the disempowered side.
Yeah.
Of femininity. I was just sitting there thinking, like, when you asked about power, what did I associate with power? And I think of course, my dog is going to do what he's going to do. he is the
Right.
only man in my life, and he wants lots of attention all the time.
Yeah, he's a mammal, right? So he likes the same thing. All mammals like attention.
Yeah, he does. So, what I was thinking about was, to me, I would be interested to hear what some of the people, 2 or 3 people listening, think. But what my definition of power was, my initial reaction was having a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if people's understanding and association with power is relevant to how they were brought up, the dynamics in which the culture from which they come, the belief system which they have. But also, when I say having a voice, I mean, it relates to this, right? Like a voice to say, no, you don't get to do that to me. No, you don't get to treat me that way. No, whether it's another man or a woman, or a man saying no or a woman saying no, whatever that is. But also, I was thinking about, I feel very fortunate to be a female, and I don't know why this is. It feels like I can say no to even a request, like to give someone a ride that I don't want to do, right? But I also know that it's something I've had to work super, super, super hard not to feel shame and guilt about.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I feel that, like saying no means I'm ashamed and I'm guilty, right? If other women or even other men feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. So, I mean, there's a thing, and I've got it too, about people pleasing, right? Like where, and I think it's probably more common for women in our culture to be raised to sort of take care of everybody, right? To have that sort of traditional maternal aspect where, you sacrifice. And again, it goes back to maybe the dark side of that is giving away your power. It's not just like, giving away. And so what I hear you describing very eloquently is that power can be the ability to set boundaries, right? The physical boundaries, and to hold sovereignty, right? Sovereignty is important. It's something I really try to instill in my daughters, that nobody touches you without your permission ever. Nobody can take away your ability to govern your physical body, your mind, and all of these things. And God bless them. They are powerful little shamanistas. Like I wouldn't mess with them. They're powerful. They're powerful.
There's also the idea of internal boundaries, right? Like external boundaries, like I say no, you don't touch me there, you're not welcome in my home, whatever that is. And then an internal boundary, I think that a lot of women struggle with, and I'm sure men too, but a lot of women struggle with is, you say this, therefore it isn't a reality for me, right? So how do I make sure that not only does someone not harm me physically or sexually or mentally, but also if I am subjected to some kind of patriarchal abuse, do I internalize that and go, I'm dirty, I'm bad, I'm disgusting, I wanted something like that to happen to me, I was a child, but I liked it, or I want, how do I, these are really painful things to talk about, but they're also really important, because that internal fissure of a boundary is also that can be the most dangerous boundary that we let get penetrated.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I know that you've got expertise in trauma, and my experience with trauma is that it can sort of break down that internal boundary. That was a great way of putting that. I hadn't thought about it that way, that, you do wind up internalizing that stuff. Like, obviously I did something wrong, or this would not have happened to me. Or obviously, the other one I hear a lot is, karma, right? Like the idea of karma, like if something bad happens to me, I deserve to be punished, kind of thing, which is the spirit, like that's it's a spiritual idea, karma, cause and effect, but what a dark aspect of that, right? What a dark aspect.
The most punishing thing, I don't think that's what the actual intention of karma is. I think karma can also mean just energy shifts and good things happening, and like learning lessons that you actually, if you look at it from an empowerment perspective, something I wanted to learn, like we go way out there with the spiritual stuff, like something I chose because I love myself so much. I wanted to learn something. I love my being so much. But instead of that, we go, oh, I'm dirty. I need to be punished, And sometimes too, like, I think that's a way to go a little, like, we can feel that if it's our fault, then maybe we have a little bit of control. You know, if something bad is our fault, then maybe it's not as scary. The world's not as scary of a place. So this.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You know, I've read a bit about PTSD specifically. I'm thinking years ago, actually met Colonel Dave Grossman, who wrote the book On Killing, and is about the training that they did in the Army. And what they found, they did all of this research, and they found that it was actually really, really difficult to get people to shoot each other. And even going back to like Revolutionary War and all of this stuff, like face to face. And so over time, they developed these psychological methods to overcome that. They used pop-up targets that look like humans to create this instinct. And that's why we see...
It's like really horrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really horrifying. We're really good at getting people to kill other people now, but we're really terrible at bringing them back and integrating them into society, which I'm sure
is a oh my gosh.
Right. And so one of the pieces about PTSD that they found in this research that I was reading was that a lot of it was about how much control the person actually had over what was going on. And so the less control over the situation, you're put in a terrible situation that you have no control over, the more impactful the trauma was, right? And it was also more impactful if it was being caused by another human being than if it was caused by, say, a natural disaster.
Right.
So another human being doing something, you know, another human being coming in and burning down my house versus, you know, a wildfire burning down my house. The human being aspect of that is psychologically appears to be much more traumatic, has much more of a trauma impact.
Which is, it's horrifying, but also based on what we're talking about, super important. Because what that means then, right, is that, I mean, in a non-scientific way, just my like assertion of this would be that we want to be connected so much.
Yes.
You know? And so when the desire to connect is faced with like something horrific, right? We create meaning around it to the point of blaming ourselves, but also the upside of this, which is a very sad thing, but the upside of it is that we really want to connect. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so whether we're male or female or gender non-binary or whatever we are, we want to be belonging. We want to belong. We want to connect. And we want to not only not harm others, but we want to not be harmed by others. And that goes back to what we were talking about with the fear thing and empowerment. So the fear thing and empowerment with, I'm afraid because I'm afraid of being harmed.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that research. I mean, that's horrifying that they do that to people.
It's horrifying. And the effects.
How are they going to survive in that environment unless they're basically made into beasts?
Right.
I mean, you're non-human. You can't be human in that moment.
Yeah, it does take a piece of your humanity away to do that. And the people we're putting in there are, you know, usually 18 and 19-year-old males. Now a lot more females than there used to be. You know, these young people whose brains aren't even completely formed yet.
I was going to say, you know a lot more about science than I do, but I would suspect...
You can say it.
I have like 3 transferable skills, Jay. But what I was going to say is that the thing that's so interesting to me is that I would be curious, and I'm sure there's tons of research on this, but if that part of my brain, the animalistic nature of my brain is activated, maybe it can't be unactivated. I mean, maybe it can't be unactivated. Maybe that's the crime. Maybe that's the thing that's being done to people, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, you see too, I mean, and I don't know, I am not a neuroscientist, so I don't have, you know, I have some understanding, but you do see physical changes to the structures of people's brains from that, right? And we know that. So here I'm gonna totally nerd out on you now. There's a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex,
yes,
which I'm sure you know about, and that amongst other things, it's first of all, it's the largest pain processing center of the brain. It has the highest number of opiate receptors in the brain. It processes, it's one of the areas that when they look at a functional MRI, that lights up in processing pain. So we think that it's really responsible for physical pain. The other major role that this part of your brain plays is that it's scanning for social connection. So social rejection hurts, right? When we talk about having a broken heart, literally hurts your brain.
Trauma to your brain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Literally hurts your brain in the same way that physical pain hurts your brain. They're perceived in the same part of your brain. In the same way that, so when you get a hug or you have a positive social connection with somebody or you pat your dog, you get a shot of oxytocin, right? And it goes straight to the ACC and it makes you feel good. It makes you like, if something hurts on your body, that's why, my kids stub their toe. They want to come give me a hug because it feels good, right? Like it gives them that legitimately feels good.
For your brain to thrive.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I mean, and when you like, I know we're kind of bouncing around.
That's okay. We can be random.
I like that.
It's our talk. We can talk about whatever we want.
Talk about space cadets.
Yeah.
Anything. But like what I was thinking about is going back to like sort of the initial thing we talked about with the male presence in the Harvey Weinstein and how can men have a voice of wanting to be advocates.
Yes.
But also the conscious male feeling like, is this my fault? That's a physical pain, right? Like I don't belong. I don't fit in. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, even if I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That's powerful to think about and also painful to think about.
Yeah, and you kind of reminded me of something that came up. So it's kind of a reality for me. Like I'm a hugger, right? I love hugs, but I would never, and I've spoken about this, I would never initiate a hug with a non-related female, only because I'm really, I do have friends I know who are like, I can't have somebody touch me unless I initiate it. I know that that's the case. But I'm also really, like, underneath my friendliness and gregariousness, and I love everybody, is this fear that I'll be perceived as doing something creepy because there are these guys out there who would take advantage of a hug. And I remember even back in my college days, I worked, I went to Emerson College for undergrad, and I worked at WERS, 4,000 watts of reggae power. And so I worked there on the management team one year, and talking with the station manager, and she was asking, she's like, if somebody came to you crying, if a female, somebody who worked for the radio station came to you crying, would you give them a hug? And I was like, absolutely not. And she's like, well, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? I'm like, unless she initiated the hug, like I don't feel comfortable doing that. But how terrible is that? A statement on where I feel like my place is, so that I can't comfort somebody in that way. But I'm scared to death of coming across that way, of coming across as taking advantage of, especially somebody who's upset.
So you're carrying around, like, I would call that like collective shame.
Yeah.
Shame, collective shame, collective fear, collective self-blame over something you have no control over.
James is saying John gives great hugs, for the record. Thanks, James. Appreciate the
sweet.
Yeah. I'm sure I have hugged James on more than one occasion, so he's speaking from experience.
Next door neighbor. He
lives in New York, but we went to high school together, and he used to live in my town here in Maine, but he moved away. You got to move back, James. We would love to have you come back. So I'm gonna
all 13 people in your town.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, you could be number 16 in our town.
I really am serious about the collective shame.
Absolutely.
The collective shame of the female, like having a voice. I have to have if I have this voice, then I'm going to be someone in my family, another, is going to tell me that I'm making it up or that this never happened. And then this collective male shame of like, if I touch you, I'm dirty. If I give you a hug, which everyone needs, I'm in danger. And then it goes back to that that part of the brain we were talking about. I'm in danger. I'm in danger. I'm in danger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't connect, but then the goal is to connect. So how do I connect? And then we're all walking around not knowing how to either get that need met in a healthy way.
Right. Right. And something I was thinking about too, the sort of the tension between sort of the way male goals are set up from a young age and female goals, right? Like on a sexuality basis, like men, the goal is to score, right? Like traditionally, the goal is like, get laid as early as you can, as often as you can, with as many conquests, all this stuff. And then the female goal is to keep that from happening, right? Is to prevent that, because you're like, if you have sex with a lot of guys, you're a slut, or whatever. Like, what a terrible way to set up society, where you have already have conflicting goals around sex
and adversity. But then you also, if you happen to be heterosexual, you want that attention. Even if you're not heterosexual, there's a certain idea of getting in that attention, right?
Yeah.
That makes you valid, that makes you, that makes you mean something. But then you can't have it because then you're dirty if you have it. Or if you don't, it's like we're set up. Yeah. I had an interesting experience. So I was raised in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And one of the jokes about being raised in New Orleans is anybody that grew up there will know the first question people ask you is, where did you go to high school? I have no idea. It's just like a thing. Mm-hmm. And New Orleans is very segmented in terms of schools. So there's public schools, and then there's like fancy schools, and then there's Catholic schools. And most of the Catholic schools are gender specific, right? So I went to an all girls high school, and unexpectedly, it was probably one of the most empowering experiences of my entire life, because there wasn't that tension between who was going to get what attention from which male, and that was sort of erased. And pretty much all the women I went to high school with that I continue to remain in contact with, there's several of them that are really good friends, they all have a very strong female voice.
There's really something about that. And
you would think it would be diminishing, right? Because like the intent of the all-girls high school is not to empower women, really, right? Like,
sure, right.
Right. That wasn't why I was sent there.
Yeah.
But that's the impact it had on me and some of my best friends still to this day, don't seem to be, are extremely empowered in their voices and in their approach. So I just think it had the converse effect. And I'm not sure if the same is true for all male schools. I would be interested to see, if I talk to some of my younger friends, if they had a different experience than that.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a public school, so I couldn't tell you. So we were mixed. But it's interesting. So one of the things that popped into my head is, so I'm gonna say something relatively controversial. Like, I think there's a place in our society for gender-specific organizations, right? I know that can be controversial because it feels exclusionary, right? It's like, I don't have like the Boy Scouts has started allowing females to join in. I don't have a really strong feeling about that. Like, I think that's probably okay. But for example, you take an organization like the Freemasons, which has been an all-male dominated organization for its entire history. It's in their rules. You can't allow women in, whatever. Some people see that as a sexist thing, and in a way it is, particularly when the Freemasons wielded political power. That was problematic. In the United States, that's not the case anymore. In countries like France, that may be an issue. But for me, my experience with Freemasonry is that it's a positive place for men to gather and talk about things like what is virtuous, what is honesty, what is that. And so, I don't like, I'm not going to break, I'm not a political scientist, I'm not going to break it apart that way. Like, I think there's a place for that, as long as there's an equal place for women to gather and do the same thing. I think that's valuable, right? Like, I think
if you're including everyone, you're including no one. I mean, I think that if everything is for everybody, then nothing is for anyone. So I think that, for instance, I think that there has to be a place for men to talk to other men. There has to be a place for women to talk to other women. There has to be a place for people of color to talk to other people of color. I'm gay. There has to be a place for me to have gay friends that I specifically talk to about things that gay people talk about.
Right. Because you have unique concerns, right? You share unique concerns, and that doesn't mean that.
And I think that places that I think that there also has to be places. There has to be space and a place for integration. And I know I think that. But if we're always, I think about it in a less, like, if we're going to take this, like, what you feel is controversial and make it similar but not controversial, I would say think about, like, how a lot of, like, I did theater as a kid. Did you play sports, or did you do theater? Did you?
Oh, please! I'm a big theater.
Okay, you're
band, chorus.
Like, I love Broadway shows. Anyway, like, one of the best things in my life was not always getting picked. Okay, that's why I'm okay with failure, in part, because I didn't always make the part. I didn't always get my way. There's a tendency now, and I understand inclusion. It's absolutely important.
Right.
But not everybody can make the team. That's sort of a separate issue, but it's not really, because it's this idea that, like, everyone makes the team, then I don't learn a lesson that there's differentiation, that I have to earn things. And sometimes just because of who I am, I get to go somewhere, and just because of who I am, I don't. And that doesn't mean I'm excluding everyone. It means I'm coming closer to other people that can relate to me. So that, think about the 12-step community. That is a place where you don't want to go if you're not, right. It's like, but that's okay to exclude there, because it's a thing that you don't want to go to unless you have to stop drinking, or you happen to have a sex addiction, or whatever that is. But like, it's a perfect example of how something where people are separated out can make a huge and positive impact.
Yeah.
So please.
This is live if you're watching this, so we can't do anything about the dogs. There's no editing. It's fine. We're good with it all. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think most of my friends are female, but I certainly have male friends, and I enjoy sometimes just gathering with guys, and not locker room talk, as our famous president talked about. I've never experienced talk like that in any locker room. But just because, talk about the stuff that's going on. I'm not sort of on the traditional side. I'm not a huge sports fan. I'm not, don't drink a lot of beer, that kind of thing. But that's okay. Like, those are things that are, I think, stereotypical and not really core to the my experience of what being a male is like, that stereotypical stuff. But we were talking about before, sort of how the patriarchy, how the patriarchal society sort of hurts everybody, right? And sort of some of the hidden ways I think that's hurtful. I mean, there's the obvious stuff, like wage discrepancies with women and sexual harassment in the workplace and all of those things. And you can look at those things, but on the male side, you see men dying by suicide at twice the rate of women. You see men dying earlier with more heart disease, all of these things, because these are socialization issues most of the time.
James is asking, I want to listen, but I don't want to miss James.
Oh, no, that's okay. There's times when you can't carry a 250-pound person out of a burning fire, but then you do not qualify as a firefighter. But that does not mean some women can't do it. The initial interview should not determine what happens. Pre-tests, no. So yeah, I think we're talking about like actual physical qualification type differences, and that in that respect, because men tend to have more testosterone, there's going to be a natural advantage in musculature and bone structure. But that being said, that would also disqualify males. Like, I don't think I could haul a 250 out of a burning building in my current physical condition either. And you can't see, but I have several, some visible, some not visible birth defects. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Navy pilot, and I didn't realize until I was about 12 that there's no way they would take me because of that. There's no way, and it was heartbreaking at the time, but I get it. Like there are things that sort of disqualify people that are real. And then there's a whole bunch of made up shit, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that shouldn't be disqualifying factors. But yeah, I take your point. Like if you don't have the physical strength to carry whatever the qualification is to be a firefighter, you shouldn't be a firefighter. But that's regardless of gender.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunate that things have gotten to such a space. And I also understand why they have. I mean, we have to have these conversations that there's the very, very valid fear that you wouldn't even have the opportunity to, I don't know what it's called for firefighters. I'm going to use it as a totally ridiculous term, an audition.
Right. I was thinking the same thing, but that's probably not.
But that you might not even get the chance to audition.
Right.
Or, I've had clients, specifically women, and specifically, it's unfortunate it's gotten to a place there where someone can be, a black female and happen to see, without even intending to, that they're making a quarter of what their counterparts are making. And this is not an intentional find with the same degree and experience and title. That's horrifying. Yeah. And that's the kind of level of trauma we're at, I think, societally, and why then the converse side is losing the freedom to have their voice, which we don't want that to happen either, because if the male presence, the positive male presence loses its voice, then the female presence is also not getting the need met either.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no validity in erasing an entire voice to get another voice, because you're still not going to get the need met on the other end. Right.
Yeah. Something that's come up recently that's perplexed me. So I have a background in computer science. I worked in the field for like 20 years. In the 80s, and this is still not a great number, but in the 80s in computer science... Do you know this one? Oh, you froze up. We'll hope that you'll rejoin.
No, James said this is the best live video he's ever seen on Facebook. And I said, he's your biggest fan. He's my only fan.
James, you're my only fan.
Yeah.
Stop stalking me, James. You know where I live. I'm going to change my locks. So something that's come up recently for me, having I've been in computer science for about 20 years. I worked in large companies, small companies. So back in the 80s, about 37% of the people in computer science programs in college were women. It's still not 50-50, but now it's a tiny fraction of that. It's like 7 or whatever. So in many ways, we've moved backwards. And I don't
really have.
I don't understand it. Like, I don't know why that's happening.
I'd say 90% of my clientele are in the tech industry, probably because I'm a virtual therapist. And this is a frequent conversation of where do we even find the women to work for us?
Yeah.
Why are they not here? Like, we want them even.
Like,
and I'm going to be fair, I'm going to, based on my website and the stuff I say, I'm going to attract sort of a conscious person, to be fair.
Yeah, sure.
But there's definitely like a question, like, where are they?
Yeah. And what happened? What happened?
Did they go away? Yeah. Do you have an answer? I don't have that answer.
I don't. I wish I did. And because, the thing is, I've worked with absolutely brilliant, a lot of, the women I have worked with in computer science are the top of their field without exception. So there's no like, oh, I can't, I don't know. Like, I don't want to think that it's, I can't do science because I'm a girl, because that would horrify me if that's the case. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I'd like to know. And I remember a few years ago, Google was getting bashed over the number of females it was hiring. And they were and honestly, like, I don't know if they were being terrible with their pay or whatever, but I was looking at it and I'm like, their hiring was about double what the graduation rate was of women. So were they really being so bad? Like, the graduation rate back then was like, I don't know, 8% women, 12% women, and their hiring rate of women in tech was about double that. So, they were, I think, actively recruiting. Maybe they weren't paying women well. I don't know. It seems to be the case, and that's definitely something that needs to be rectified if that's the case. But why, there's all this push to get girls into STEM like really early on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know where the disconnect is. I haven't figured that out yet, and nobody's explained it to me. If you know, come online and explain it to me.
You want to know if somebody knows somebody who knows. I would like to know that as well.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of, and this is a pure guess, is that just the pressure, this differential we kind of started the conversation with energetically, is sort of pushing things back so we can spring forward. If we're looking at it from the spiritual perspective, but
yeah,
actual numbers, I don't know.
Yeah.
Where did they go? Where are they working? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And why, with the push to get girls into STEM and early education, why the low enrollment rates in computer science programs in college? Like, we're obviously, I think that's an indication that we're failing really early somewhere in earlier education.
No, I wonder, John, like, I wonder, now again, there's like plenty of researchers who obviously decided that pushing STEM early on was going to make a difference, but isn't it interesting that if like that wasn't the case and women were naturally integrating into, like, finding their way into this computer science or the sciences, maybe the push is sort of an underlying message, like, we have to push you because obviously you would never do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, like some kind of boomerang effect or something.
I don't know. It's just a guess, but it's like, you know, if you think about Montessori education and those kind of things and self-discovery, people are actually looking to their natural interest. So I don't know if it's just like this subconscious thing where it's like, oh, I'm being told to do this, so I'm not, or maybe something must be wrong with me because I'm being forced to think about this because I wouldn't normally think about it. I mean, I don't know the answer, but that is, if there's a push now and it's not happening, and there wasn't a push and it was happening, I don't know. That's bizarre.
We clearly need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, this is the whole. But I do want to. I know we don't have tons and tons of times, and I do want to say something that I wanted to say, and I'm scared to say, so I'm going to say it.
Say it anyway.
I just want to say that, first of all, I'm an open lesbian. I am a female, and I absolutely, the majority of my life, I have had nothing but 90% of the men I have encountered in my life, as a child, as an adult, have been amazing to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's the norm, but I have some pretty remarkable, conscious, true, feminist, engaging male presences in my life, in my personal experience, even more than a lot of women in my life. And I just want to say that. I also have had negative experiences, and I've also had my own share of sexually inappropriate advances and assault. But I will say this, that hasn't been the dramatic norm. And I don't know if I'm unique, but I do want to create a space here for my male friends because they deserve to have that space with my voice. And I don't know if you have the same you could share in terms of your experiences with women, but I want to say that as an advocate for women, as an advocate for good and healthy men, as an advocate for anyone who's a good person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so I want to talk about my experiences with women in a second, which overwhelmingly positive experiences with women. But I think there's this cognitive bias, and it's natural, and this isn't meant as a criticism of anyone because we all have all of the cognitive biases to some degree, right? there's this availability heuristic for one thing, right? Which says that things that are dramatic, things that we are more easily remember, we overestimate how frequent they are. So somebody has a really traumatic experience, and this is a survival instinct, right? Like when we were cave people, you go down to the river and your friend was eaten by a tiger. You're never going down to that river again, even if you've been there 1,000 times before and nothing bad has ever happened, right? Because you can say, going down to that river means somebody's getting eaten by a tiger. So, yeah, so it's a survival thing, right? Survival thing to and there's nothing. I don't mean this of any criticism of anyone who's had a traumatic experience with men or with women or whatever in any way that gets overestimated, because these experiences are horrific and can certainly be hugely impactful on people. But I think it has to be the case, like if most men were terrible sexual predators, the world would be a whole different place. That's not to say that it isn't a huge problem. It is absolutely a huge and devastating problem that needs to be addressed. But it's amazing the damage a few people can do. And again, they are absolutely, women are taking the brunt of this, but they're damaging men too, because I'm afraid to give people a hug, right? Like I'm afraid to hug
I'm giving you a virtual hug.
Thank you. And we can all use that. But because of guys like that, I'm afraid of how I come across. So then I have to sort of blunt who I am to feel okay with myself around.
Yeah, you're carrying the shame of somebody else's bad behavior.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I'll talk about my experiences with women, and this is kind of maybe an interesting thing as well. So, I've had some experiences with females that if I think the situation were reversed, like when I was much, much younger, if I think the situation was reversed, we would definitely call it sexual assault. But I never thought of it that way, because I think I came from the age where like guys can't be assaulted, right? Like that was the thought. I have had certainly unwanted advances, physical stuff that was not appropriate or invited in really some crazy situations. Absolutely not the norm of my experience. Clearly, that's not that's not the majority of my experience with women. I would say the majority of my friends are women. I have lots of women and male friends, but the majority of my friends happen to be women, probably because I was involved in the arts all through school, and I intelligently chose a college that wound up being more women than men, that had a good ratio for a straight male to go to. So a lot of my friends are women, and the overwhelming majority of my experiences are extremely positive. And I think that's probably a universal experience. It's probably true overall.
Well, I just want to validate and say thank you for sharing your experience. It's absolutely true that aggression of any kind from anyone is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have had an equal experience of male friends and clients who've had similar experiences, advances from men and women. So
yeah. I've certainly had.
Know that there's a collective energy of, I don't get to talk about it because I'm a guy and I'm supposed to be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had lots of advances from men, when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, the much more rare to have an experience with a female, but it has happened, and so I have to think that it's something that happens, and it's something that also guys don't talk about. And the actor Terry Crews came out recently. I don't know if you saw this. So if you know Terry Crews, he's like a 240-pound dude. He's built. This is a muscly guy. And when the Harvey Weinstein thing came out, he came out and said, I was at a Hollywood event, and this male producer came up and grabbed my genitalia in front of my wife. And people will ask me, why didn't I punch him out? why didn't I talk to anyone? He said, because I'm a 240-pound black man, and I would go to prison and never be able to work again in this field if I had said anything to anyone or done anything to anyone. So, there is I do absolutely believe that women are the vast majority of the people who are assaulted. That's been my experience I've taught self-defense for many, many years, and done all kinds of workshops and classes and things. That's my experience, but it does happen to men, and there's this tendency like, you're not going to be believed, or why didn't you fight back, or the same thing. I know the same thing happens to women. What were you wearing? Why do we? It's that victim blaming that happens, and it happens, I think, with both. It's terrible. It's terrible.
It really is. I hope we can do this again soon and keep talking about it. I think there's so much more to say.
Absolutely.
And we could even start, and not just gender, but to start to think about this spiritual idea of how anyone who is different from us, we can maybe find some semblance of a feeling of curiosity, at least, to say, how can I get closer to understanding, even if it's, barring acts of horrific nature. Okay, I'm talking about just a difference in experience, and trying to understand more closely what that's like, so that we can all get our needs met, and for connection. You know?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I know we're at 6:00, and we probably want to wrap up. We've been talking a lot, but it's been great.
We just like to talk. It's okay.
Yeah. I seriously appreciate you coming on here and talking to me, and I definitely want to do this again. I think I've received words of encouragement from lots of people who are interested in this conversation and conversations like this. So I think hopefully this is some important stuff that we're talking about that lots of people can get in on, and we can continue to do this.
That sounds great. Thanks so much for having me on your page, Sean.
Yes, absolutely. And we've worked.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for all the support.
And James is giving us a thumbs up. Julia,
great.
I'm sorry I didn't get your comment up before. I was paying too much attention, but yes, over time, human touch has become limited because of abusers. Absolutely. We are a touch-deprived culture, and that's something maybe we can talk about next time. That's a challenge to figure out.
Okay.
So awesome. We'll talk to you soon, and look for me on Facebook.